Welcome back, Honors. All right. So, first and foremost, I hope all y'all break a leg in the show this weekend. I'm hoping to come and see it next weekend. All right. We're in the middle of all this stuff right now, so it's a little bit hard to be everywhere at once, but I'm hearing that it's great stuff, and I'm excited to come and see you guys perform, and I bet you guys are going to do great, even if you got to deal with Dean in the band. All right. So, now really quick, we left off at this point in class, right? We were talking about how, this trade network is not as simple as they've always taught it to you in elementary school. It's not just 3 legs, it's 85 million legs, right? However, the 3-leg model does set up an easy base effectiveness to explain how now economies have grown global and are not so localized anymore, right? So, the second leg of the Transatlantic trade network is known as the Middle Passage, right? Usually on this particular passage, slaves are transported from the Americas from Africa to the Americas, usually picked up at forts on the west coast of Africa, all right, west coast ports in Africa, on very, very large vessels that could hold anywhere from up to 250 to 500 people, right? Now, carrying on these items as well, jot it down as the last bullet point, still carrying processed goods from Europe, right? So, and we're going to talk about how that's kind of screwed up here in a minute, but they're still carrying processed goods in the hopes of selling them to actually the colonies and stuff like that. So, the third leg is going to be where merchants are going to drop these slave deposits, and the third leg is going to create where merchants carry sugar, raw sugar anyway, molasses, cotton, rum, tobacco, and other plantation products or raw materials to Europe, and then the cycle starts all over again. Those raw materials are then going to be taken, processed into processed goods like guns, cloth, cash, rum, alcohol, materials made in this new hand industry putting out system that we were talking about. And then the whole process starts over again. So when you really think about it, are the colonies kind of getting messed up right now? Yeah. They're growing all the products necessary for this economy and then having it sold back to them again. All right. So, and still having to buy it at a marked up price. I mean, when you look at the American Revolution, wouldn't you be a little bit mad? But that's what the entire thing looks like in a nutshell, right? So, anyway, there are a lot of positives and a lot of negatives to this entire network, right? The biggest positives is it makes a ton of money, right? And when it makes a ton of money, jotted down underneath there somewhere, makes a lot of money for Europe. Europe becomes the guiding economic focal point and just gigantic economic powerhouse of the world because of this network, right? Cultural diffusion is going to blow up as well. Love that word. International relations, and it's going to help establish new countries. The negatives, on the other hand, ships could be lost at sea, leading to a result of death and destruction, increased slavery due to now the easeability of picking up slaves in Africa and taking them to the New World colonies or other colonies as well, as far away as India and Asia and back to Europe again as well. It also is going to promote racism. It's going to promote the idea that certain races are subservient and that they are meant to do these certain things. And this is also during the Enlightenment, where people begin to look at tribal people as heathenistic or kind of less than, right? So, now, moving on, though, it's also going to help a lot of these trades, going to help a lot of these cities grow, right? So the slave trade especially helped cities in North America grow very, very fast and make a lot of money, right? Now, without this, don't write slave trade, without the transatlantic network, the U.S. might have actually never grown into the power that it is today, which is a terrible thing to say, and I wish that that wasn't true, but it is, all right? So don't write this down. This is just an introduction kind of thing. This is what we're now going to use to talk about the process of transporting people over the water into these new areas of the world, right? So the big thing that you got to understand is that most Africans were taken from inland villages, right? Now, when I say taken from inland villages, there is a very, very big misconstrued, misunderstood stereotype of how this works, right? Most Africans were not taken from their homes forcibly. Pretty much none of them were forcibly taken from their homes by white traders from Europe and then transported across the ocean against their will. What actually happened is a lot of time tribal warfare was still a very large part of African society, all right? So when this would occur, much like in Greece under Sparta, much like with the Helots, remember those days? Man, that was a long time ago. Much like in other tribal kind of, I would say, unindustrialized societies, usually the losing group would become slaves to the winners, right? So these winning African tribes would actually trade these people for the processed goods they wanted from Europe, all right? Making their lives easier, making hunting easier, making fighting wars easier, right? So after being enslaved, many of them were forced to march on foot to these coastal ports, right? So they could walk distances of up to 1,000 miles chained together, men, women, and children. That's the same as walking from Camden Catholic to Disney World, to give you a heads up. All right, so like that's a hike. All right, so imagine walking that far. Now, here we go. Around 90% of all slaves are going to be taken and picked up on the west coast of Africa, right? And countries like Ghana and the Ivory Coast, okay? Now, slaves are going to be crammed below decks in chains without any type of plumbing system, without any type of way to move, right? And they were going to be forcibly chained there in the dark, fed only enough to actually stay alive for a long journey that could last anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months, right? So the journey to America is, oh, wait, I just said that. All right, and the ships on the water faced a lot of risks, right? And they were crammed on there as many as 500 people per boat, which could mean that had they faced a risk like storms or pirates and been sunk by them, because pirates have no idea, or not no idea, have no want for the people on these boats. They want the goods that are coming on the boats to the colonies, right? So once the goods have been taken off, they would usually sink the ship with the people on it, right? So you're talking about the death of 500 people, right? Now, around half of all the slaves are going to die from disease, or the ones that did die, starvation or gross mistreatment, right? Some Africans, actually, there were even reports would actually like commit suicide or infanticide, which is the killing of a child to avoid enslavement. All right. So this is a terrible, horrible moment throughout history that we all wish that we could just kind of wave a wand and get rid of, but unfortunately that's not the case. All right. So now the impact of the Atlantic slave trade, though, is many African cities, villages, and societies are going to completely fall apart. Some tribes don't even exist anymore due to this entire process. Due to the slave trade, while American cities are going to prosper, right? Which is a very, very double-ended kind of thing. About 2,000 slaves a year were sent to the Americas every year in the 1500s. By the 1700s, that number is going to grow to 80,000 a year, which is mind-boggling, all right? By the 1800s, 11 million slaves had reached the Americas. By 1880s, by the early 1800s, the slave trade is going to be outlawed by most of Europe, right? So 11 million slaves had reached the Americas, and they were a growing number of people, right? Another 2 million, though, had died because of the slave trade. So I know this is a little bit of a somber flip, but it's stuff that everybody should know, all right? But I will see you guys later on. I'll see you on Monday. Get ready for your test. Have a great weekend, all right? See ya.